Good morning. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Prime Minister Morrison?
Yes.
Hi, this is Li Xin from Caixin Media. Thank you so much for accepting our interview. And I know you're on a very busy schedule. Can we get it started now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much and have a very nice morning. My first question is about the relations between Australia and China. Arguably, it's not at the high point for the past year or two. Why do you think the relations have soured between Australia and China, and what priorities do you put on improving the Australia's relationship with China?
Well, I think we have a productive and warm relationship with China, and it's all part of our comprehensive strategic partnership, which our government is absolutely committed to, and that works strongly to the benefit of both partners in that relationship, and it's underpinned by some strong fundamentals. We have substantial economic complementarities, we have deep institutional and community links, and we have some shared interests and respect each other, I think, greatly. The prosperity of our region in which we all live depends very much on this comprehensive strategic partnership, and that's why we're so committed to it. I'll be giving that a very strong priority as Prime Minister. We won't always agree. That's, I think, obvious. We have different systems and different views, and we have different interests and concerns on occasions. But it's how we manage those, I think, is very important, with respect and consistent with the principles of equality and shared interest.
Uh-huh. My follow-up question is actually about a very concerning factor from the Chinese side. That's the U.S.-China relationship, and because the U.S. is changing its approach on China.
I'm finding it very hard. I'm finding it very hard to understand you. It must be a bad line. I wonder if you could. Is there a landline we can call you on? Because I'm finding it very hard to understand and hear you.
Oh, I apologize. I'll contact Kate, and probably she can dial my landline in just 1 minute. I'll contact her. Thank you. Hello, Kate. 效果不好。这个酒店的电话是什么？这边有个电话，但是接电话了。接电话。Hello, if someone wants to call us through the room landline, which number do they dial? There's no direct number, so they have to call the 80991234 and they'll put. 你就我已经发给他对方了，到时候你这个在电话上，待会儿电话要打进来的。嗯。Okay. Hello, Kate. Hello. 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 Hi. Hi, Kate. Yes, I saw your email, and I'll dial this number now. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Hi, putting you through now.
Hello, Kate. 哎，你一直在录这个是吗？
Hello.
Hello, Prime Minister. Apologize for the landline. Can you hear me now?
That's a bit better, yes, thank you.
Okay. Let me continue. So my second question is about the currently under the U.S.-China trade war background. If the U.S. continues to try to decouple its economy from China, what would Australia's approach be?
Well, we always seek to work closely with both China and the United States. We have independent relationships with both countries, and I always believe it's best to have those conversations directly and quietly in an encouraging and positive way, because the prosperity and the security of our region depends upon it. And so I think Australia is in a unique position, I think, to engage with both China and the United States, and to, in all cases, seek to de-escalate, not escalate, and to do so from a position of friendship with both countries independently.
What if the U.S. will force Australia to choose side?
Well, I don't get into hypotheticals. I just get into the process of successfully managing important relationships in Australia's national interests. That's what Australia must always do, but we should do it, I think, in a very constructive and careful way.
Okay, thank you very much. And also, in terms of the Chinese investment in Australia, which has been going very strong, what's your government's approach to stay open to foreign investments and especially those from China in particular?
Well, we have the most liberal foreign investment rules in this part of the world, and always have. And we've always welcomed foreign investment to Australia, and that is included from China, who have been an increasingly large investor in Australia. There are clear rules for how that is done in Australia, and we need to be very clear about what those rules are and how they work, so there are no surprises, and that when everybody works closely with the rules that apply, just as it's important for Australian investors and other investors to work closely and understand the rules that apply in China for how investment works. I mean, Australia has a much more open and liberal attitude to foreign investment in Australia than any other country in our region. But we will always encourage and support that investment where it serves Australia's national interest to do so, and that's been our track record.
You might may follow up with the Belt and Road Initiative, and Australia choose to stand back from working with China on that. And will that create barriers for investment, especially those on infrastructure?
Yeah. Well, Australia welcomes the contribution of the Belt and Road Initiative and that it can make to meeting significant infrastructure needs in the region, and we're keen to strengthen the engagement with China on regional trade and infrastructure development projects that align with international standards of governance and transparency. So there's some very important infrastructure that is being built around our region. We want to make sure that the way these projects roll out are really helping these countries, which I'm sure is the intention, and supporting greater connectivity and greater prosperity in our region.
Okay. Thank you. And another question is currently about the Huawei and the Chinese private companies. Recently, your government made decisions that pretty much preclude Huawei and leading Chinese companies from participating in the next 5G generation telecommunication service here. Well, some other Western countries like Canada or UK have not taken the approach. So if there are security risks Are there better ways or are there less costly ways Australia can manage them?
Well, our government's 5G decision was not directed at any particular country. It was made after careful, objective and extensive review of the national security risks that are unique to 5G. It's a very different technology to those that have gone previously. And, of course, Australia will always act on its responsibilities to safeguard what we believe are critical national assets in the same way that China would or any other country in the region would. They take that view. China takes that view in how they protect their critical national assets, and including in the telecommunications sector. So our actions are no different to China's in that regard, and we'll continue to pursue a consistent approach to all countries, and one that's based on our national interest, which is what I'm sure any country in our region would expect us to do, and is very much the approach that the Chinese government takes in relation to their own assets.
I see. Thank you so much. And also, next question is about the CHAFTA. It's a landmark agreement and also a symbol of where Australia and China want to go in terms of opening trade. What priorities would you identify in building on the CHAFTA achievement and making that a living and a very productive agreement?
Well, I think you're right to point out how significant this standout agreement is in our region. It is opening new markets, it is lowering trade barriers, it is delivering results for both countries. More than 85% of our eligible merchandise trade can use the agreement since 2016. And Australia exported over $100 billion of goods to China last year in 2017, and that was up more than 1/5, 21.8% on the previous year. And there was an 8% rise in Chinese exports to Australia. So clearly the two-way trade is benefiting both countries. And there have already been 4 rounds of tariff cuts, and that those cuts are continuing annually up until 2029. So there's a clear priority schedule which is laid out as part of that agreement. And there are a number of built-in review mechanisms, and we're looking forward to working with China to build on the already significant benefits that the agreement has delivered. And that includes the reviews of chapter services and investment chapters, which commenced in October of last year. And we look forward to commencing a general review of the chapter to consider how we deepen liberalisation of trade and investment and further market access. But I'd say chapter has been arguably the greatest significant achievement in our relationship because it is opening up both countries to each other and it is driving prosperity for all of our citizens and more broadly across the region.
If I may switch slightly from trade and investment to politics, there has been quite a story that in Australia about Chinese influence in Australia. Does the Australian government really believe that the Chinese, especially the Chinese government, is trying to exert influence in Australia? And what would be your view on that?
Well, the laws that passed the Australian Parliament were not directed at any one country, and I'm sure in any sovereign country would be having laws to ensure that there wasn't any inappropriate influence in the domestic political affairs of our country, and I'm sure that China does not welcome any interference in the domestic political affairs of their nation either. I think this is just a very straightforward statement of principle, and it's not directed at any one country. I mean, there's plenty of individuals out there in the media and other places who might commentate on these issues, but the position of the government and our parliament is very clear, and that is these are a very straightforward set of laws which are designed to ensure that in our own domestic politics and our own domestic society that there isn't any external influence from other countries, and that's exactly what I would expect China to have in place for themselves and indeed do.
And also looking ahead, what would be your hopes for Australia-China relationships? Do you share the view of cooperation in defining the future of our relationships?
I couldn't quite hear what you said at the end there. I don't know if you're speaking directly into the phone, but what did you say?
Do you share the view of cooperation in defining the future of our relationships?
Well, I think the future of our relationship is very much defined by the comprehensive strategic partnership, which is a very significant relationship for Australia. It stands out amongst our many relations with countries all around the world. And that partnership is designed to ensure greater economic connectivity, to drive prosperity for both countries, I think to drive greater linkages at all levels within our societies, and to ensure that there is an ongoing process to make sure we stay on track to achieve all of these things. It's one thing to have a statement of commitment to relationship, which we have, but it's another thing entirely, as we also have, is to have through this partnership a way of how we keep managing for the better of both countries this relationship. And that's what I look forward to pursuing. We have a very good relationship. I think it can be an even better relationship. We'll achieve that by addressing it through the comprehensive strategic partnership, the processes that are established there, and continuing to engage each other respectfully and with great interest in our shared opportunities.
Australia has a fairly significant Chinese immigration, and a lot of Chinese people come here to study and work and live here as well. How do you evaluate the overall impact brought by Chinese immigrants, and what would be your suggestions for Chinese community here to interact with Australian media and also the overall society?
Well, we welcome Chinese students, investors, and other visitors. Trade, tourism, and student numbers are all at record highs. 183 billion in 2017 of trade, 1.4 million visitors from China in the last financial year, and we had some 184,500 students here in 2017. So all of this is making a very big contribution to our economy, and Chinese students and visitors play an increasingly important role in the life of Australian society. Chinese New Year here in Australia is one of the biggest events of the year in Australia, like it is throughout the region. And so I think it has taken on a very Australian character to it, which I think is a compliment to Chinese nationals who have settled in Australia over many, many years, going back almost over 200 years. In fact, probably around about 200 years. In fact, we've just celebrated 200 years of Chinese immigration to Australia. But also for those who've only just recently visited us for a few weeks. It is part of the mainstay, I think, of modern Australian life.
It's fantastic. And my last question is actually about domestic politics in Australia. So in the last 5 years, Australia has 6 prime ministers. And how would you help Chinese audiences to interpret that very high turnover? And looking ahead for the challenges for the coming election, what's your plan to reconcile the different voices in your party and bring them together?
Well, first of all, our two countries have very different political systems, and so there will always be differences in how those systems work and the outcomes they produce. Previous Prime Minister, Mr. Turnbull, had been in the role for the last pretty much 3 years, and so that had been, compared to the previous period, a much more stable time. The important thing, though, is that our government, the Liberal National Government, was elected 5 years ago, and we have provided a stability of economic security and harmony in policy that has served Australia, I think, incredibly well. And our government is going to continue to pursue those goals of keeping our economy strong and working constructively with our partners in the region to achieve that, because that's what then guarantees all the services that Australians rely on. But we're going to continue to work very hard on increasing the unity of our own population around these objectives to ensure that we continue to realise that the great opportunities ahead of us. Australia has had 27 years of consecutive economic growth, which is a record. And we want to keep that continuing. And our party has moved very quickly following the events of several months ago to come back together again. And we are getting very good support from the Australian community for the reason that we're providing a continuity of the strong economic leadership that is lifting the living standards of all Australians.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your wonderful answers, and I highly appreciate your time.
Thank you. And I look forward to meeting with the Chinese leadership at the various summits and meetings that are coming up in the region, both at the East Asia Summit and the APEC Summit in Papua New Guinea, in Port Moresby. And I think there'll be good opportunities to engage with the Chinese leadership there as the new Prime Minister. And I'm looking forward to that very much, and taking the opportunity to provide the assurance of the strong relationship that they can expect into the future, and be able to move forward from where we are.
Thank you so much. Highly appreciate the message. Appreciate your time, and wish you have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. 好了，剩下就靠你了。
好，
你赶紧把这个发过去，讲他。